Hello and welcome everyone to today's IFSEC Global webinar. Today we'll be discussing the current state of physical access control as well as the major trends ahead for the sector. Thank you to HID Global for sponsoring today's session alongside the two panelists, Matt and Mark, who I'll introduce shortly. I'm James Moore, editor of IFSEC Global, and I'll be moderating today. Just a few housekeeping bits before we get started. This webinar is designed to be interactive and we'll have some time towards the end for any questions you have and would like answered by the panelists, which you can put forward in the Q&A box on your screen. Please make it clear if the question is directed at a specific panelist. It just makes my life a little bit easier, which obviously I always appreciate. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will also allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media, and ask for any technical assistance should you need it. And if you'd like to watch the webinar back, or you have any internet issues during the session, or just want to share the discussion with your colleagues, don't worry, this will be recorded and available to watch back on demand. So what are we discussing today and why? Well, over the next hour, we'll be focusing on the topic of physical access control, a key part for any security program. We'll be basing much of this discussion on the findings of an exclusive trend report from IFSEC Global, which has been supported by HID as well, which is set to be released in the following weeks. With over 1,000 responses from security, facilities, and IT professionals to questions based on everything from current credentials and technology in use in the market to upgrade challenges and future trends, it's left plenty for us to discuss. The survey ran earlier this year and responses came from a global audience split across North America, EMEA, and the Asia Pacific regions. While there were some regional disparities, which are picked up on in more detail in the report, the findings represent an excellent global perspective of the current physical access control landscape. Don't worry, as attendees to this webinar, you will be notified when the report is released, but today we'll be revealing some exclusive insights into it with two experts to talk around those findings. As far as an agenda goes, we'll be splitting the discussion into a few key areas, which will leave plenty of room for input. First, we will explore some of the takeaways from questions around the current state of physical access control technology in the market. For example, are older credentials still in use, and what are the central reasons for upgrading if they are? And we'll then explore some of the challenges end users face in upgrading those credentials or their software and hardware, and also the challenges for consultants, installers, and integrators. Our results certainly suggest there are more stakeholders to factor in on upgrade process than ever before. Who are these stakeholders and what might professionals need to factor into pitches in 2022 and beyond? Finally, and central to this discussion, will be a look into the major trends at play in the physical access control sector and what's set to come over the next 5 years or so. How is new technology, such as mobile access, impacting solutions? And has COVID introduced new requirements for contactless? Also, no doubt, sustainability and cybersecurity are key topics in your firm at the moment. How can physical access control support in achieving those strategies? As I said, we will have time towards the end for audience questions. And as I noted earlier, just please highlight if that question is directed at either Matt or Mark, and just keep them relevant to the discussion. But before we get into the debate, it's probably about time I introduce today's panelists, I think. Both have plenty of expertise in the physical access control sector. Matt Haynes is Business Development Director in Physical Access Control Solutions for Europe at HID Global, while Mark Rowan is the Founder and Managing Director at Global Security Engineering and Consultancy firm QCIC. But I'll let each introduce themselves properly. So Matt, do you want to go first?
Thanks, James. Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Matt Haynes. I've been in the access control industry since 1996. Currently HID, I've been HID for 5 years, where I head up our team of business development guys heading across Europe, looking after our key end users and consultant business.
Perfect. And Mark?
Yeah, hi guys, good morning everyone. My name is Mark Rowan. I'm a director here at QCIC. We've been going for now nearly 15 years as a business, so people who might not know us, we've got offices in Cape Town, in New York, in Hong Kong, and here in London where I am, where it was founded. Over those years, we started off life as a consultancy, pure consultancy, as everyone would know us, and we've evolved into now a full services offering to our clients, primarily driven by our clients. So now, rather than just doing pure design and pure consultancy, we have a design business, we have what we call a build business and a run business. The build business helps project manage and move big enterprise organizations to the cloud or to contactless, as we'll talk about today. And our run business is more about supporting those clients, because technology is moving at such a pace now that they do struggle with all the technology leaps, and that now is an outsourced function that QCIC support. So yeah, we've got nearly 100 people around the world working with us, and yeah, been around for quite a long time now, seeing lots of changes in this industry. Very happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you both, and thank you for joining us today. I think to kickstart the discussion, it's worth just asking each of you to pick out 2 key trends you're seeing in physical access control over the past 24 months or so. Obviously, we'll go into a bit more detail on certain areas, such as mobile, contactless, that kind of thing. But and as we head into the final 15 minutes, attendees obviously are more than welcome to put your questions to the panel. But if we start with Matt, it'd be good to understand, 2 key trends that you think are going to be central to this sector.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think for me, the last 24 months, of course, have been unprecedented and have proven challenging in our business, right? But for me, the 2 key areas we've seen is a move towards more secure credential technology, in particular, say, mobile access, which I know we'll talk about a bit later on, and especially in applications where customers are taking on APIs and SDKs that are available and utilizing those as part of a customized and tailored deployment. I think secondly, for me, the other trend I'm seeing is the adoption of more secure technology like OSDP between the reader and the controller, moving away from maybe legacy WeGang connections. And this is part of, I think, an overall drive we're seeing in general of increased security standards across the end-to-end access control system.
Fantastic. And Mark, what are your thoughts?
I'll be greedy, James. I'll take 3 key points if I may.
Go ahead.
Only because I think our business has 3 businesses, right? So our design business, our consultancy business, we're seeing experience is driving change. So that's the experience of people coming into a building, not the experience of our engineers, but how do our users, how do our clients get around a building? And that's clearly being driven by frictionless and the contactless world that we've seen post-pandemic. In our build business, which is again project management for super large, super enterprise clients, we're seeing separation. So the separation of the access control system. So if you remember back in the day, the CCTV, we had CCTV, we had cameras, we had multiplexers, NVRs, DVRs, and that technology drive where we've got cameras at the edge now, and we've got cloud-based recording and cloud-based management, and we're seeing that in access control. So access control is pushing towards the edge rather than big control panels in the middle, smaller single door controllers at the edge, and then pure cloud-based management systems. And we're seeing that in our build space. In our run space, which is where we're obviously managing big systems for clients, it's all about data. How do you get your data to the right people really quickly so they can make really good informed decisions about the access control? I think the access control system is a data point system now, and especially on global scales, if you get that right and you can get that data, then definitely that's where we're seeing the change. And I think technology is driving all 3 of those areas for us at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about physical security systems, video surveillance is often the first thing that people think about, with being at the forefront of technology with AI and facial recognition. But definitely seeing access control come into that fore as well now. We've had biometrics come into it, but also mobile and as you say, the starting point for kind of a smart building, I think, which again we'll touch on later in the webinar. So if we go back now and we sort of start talking about some of the findings, and we'll talk about the current state of physical access control at the moment. Matt, we saw in our survey that a significant amount of businesses are still actually using older credentials, such as magnetic swipe cards, or lower frequency devices, or just first generation solutions. Is this something you've seen in conversations with clients, with HID's clients, and are there concerns that much of this technology is now out of date?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed picture, James. I mean, in some cases, obviously, sites we've seen sort of 2 or 3 generational upgrades on security and IT equipment. across the estate, as Mark mentioned, the evolution of CCTV and also the evolution of the complete data set for access control, whilst sort of legacy credential technology sometimes tends to be left. And that's not because there's not the will to change. We see complexities across multiple sites where, people are using the credential for multiple applications across multiple sites and multiple countries. And sometimes that can prove quite a complex problem for sites to navigate, customers navigate. Wherever we can, we aim to educate customers all the time surrounding the risks of using older credential technologies. And clearly working patterns during and post-pandemic have changed, and businesses have had to sort of prioritize, say, security and infrastructure projects. We're now starting to see a growing trend towards customers. We're now revisiting this topic to try and understand how new methods of working and physical security can coexist effectively and efficiently in the world we're currently in.
Yeah, and did you see a little bit of that people stopping some of those upgrades during the pandemic because budgets may be tighter and all this kind of stuff, or was that not something you saw?
No, we saw it. We saw some change, to be fair. So I think one of the key things we saw, and it's not a product we necessarily provide, is the physical change from people using sort of touched access, request to exit buttons to touchless technology. And in certain cases, people use that as also an opportunity to change readers, where you have a reader coming into a door and a push button going out, changing that maybe for a reader going in and a reader going out, to be able to give you a bit more of an upgraded view on the access control from a security point of view. And of course, customers are thinking about how they issue credential technology. In the past, you would go into the office, pick up a physical card, and then utilize that around the estate. Now, of course, you may not have that function of those people in place, and people are hybrid working. So the thought about, say, mobile access, where you can issue the credential from wherever you need to be to an employee, and those sorts of conversations we're now starting to see happening more and more as people can move back into work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, is that something you've seen as well? And also, what access control credentials would you suggest maybe upgrading to for those who may have older, outdated technology but don't really know where to begin?
Yeah, I'd say, look, I think what we saw during the pandemic was obviously unprecedented in all spectrums of humanity. But what we saw massively change was the funding route. Okay, so the funding route for security over the years has been diminished. And so funding is always the head of security going to ask for the head of facilities for extra money to upgrade his readers. Well, do they work? Yes, they do. We'll give the money somewhere else. When the C-suite got involved and said, well, actually, this is now a safety issue, we saw funding pour into the sector, okay? And we saw that changing massively. So when you then see the funding mechanism change, you see the outcome change from our experience. So at the advisory level, where we're talking to clients way before they're even thinking about this, we're obviously talking to them about where does the funding come from? Why do you want to do this? Is it just because it's a new technology, or is it because actually there's a reason you want this data and this credential has been mobile? So I guess when we then go down that path, and we start to then advise clients about which credential to use, who to use, what to use, and all the good things that goes into consultancy in that space, pain starts to appear a lot, and pain of transformation is a big issue, because if you've got 7,000 readers across 800 offices around the globe, it's a lot to migrate, and it's a lot to do, and you've got to do that. Potentially, you've got to do that in one lift. So again, we then start to talk about the use case and how much funding do you need to do, because it's hard, and how much pain is the C-suite really willing to take. Often we find that they are willing to take quite a lot of pain, because it's coming from the top, and the numbers on the bottom and the top are very different and have different magnitude. So I think for us, it's about then advising the client on the pain route, or the friction route that it takes to get this system involved. I mean, I remember the day years and years ago, we took a client from one card technology to a new card reader technology, which meant every single user had to have new cards. I mean, it was so bad that they employed jugglers into the lobby and magicians, right, to entertain people coming in, because actually the transformation for the user was painful. I think transformation for credential on the phone or on the device is a lot less painful, because obviously you've got a card, and the transition between a card and a mobile is a lot more easier, rather than going from one card to another card technology. So definitely we're seeing early advice saying, look, okay, you need to prepare yourself for a year, 2-year migration path. And how do you do that? And good solid planning comes into place then, before we even get to what credential you want at the end of it. And I think that's where we're seeing most of our clients that are looking to us to say that, okay, what take us through that journey. And it's more the journey then to migrate to that. And if the C-suites ask for it, it's usually a very quick journey, which we're seeing a lot of. So, and that's good, because it means it gets done quickly, which is always a challenge.
Yeah, is it something you're seeing that the security, end user security team isn't quite sure, almost that they're not used to having this kind of funding available, and then that's where your consultancy really comes into play?
Yeah, I think and it's not so much it's the type of funding. When you get an immediate funding from a C-suite, it's immediate and you have to deliver. It's not like you have to plan it. And obviously when COVID hit, it didn't warn the world it was coming. So there was no planning, there was no funding. So everyone had to move very quickly to try to scramble around. But now we're getting good positive funding for positive reasons. And obviously the drag of COVID is now pulling through. So we're seeing that, yeah, the funding is now much more mature, much better allocated into our business.
That's good. And yeah, it's worth noting for attendees, we've got some slides that we're kind of bringing up as we go through this, relating some of the points we're bringing up. Just brought up one here about what kind of access control technology is currently being actively used in the market. So this is, that is actually being used, rather than people might have and might not actually be utilizing. You can see, lots of time and attendance and ID badges in particular were the most popular answers here. You've also got 30% using biometrics now, which I think was quite a big increase from 2019, the last time we ran a survey. And mobile identities, which we will go on to a little bit later on, is 32%, which is quite a high number, almost a third using. Matt, are you seeing end users from an actual technology and features perspective for access control? Have you seen end users really require new technology over the last 2 years, maybe as a direct consequence of the pandemic?
I think as Mark has said, there's a different mindset and consideration that customers are going to. So, there's more of a holistic approach when it comes down to what am I doing with my credential, whether it's a card or whether it's a mobile device. What do I need to do outside of the realms of getting me through a door, right? So, are we using it for third-party applications, for example, room booking, cashless vending, car parking, secure printing, of course, as well. And also, am I using that device as part of my physical and also logical access through my IT network as well? So all the consideration is a lot broader than perhaps it once was. And also, there's the enhanced security element. There's a lot of press and a lot of articles, a lot of videos regarding buying cheap cloners from Amazon or the internet to clone legacy prox cards. That's well known and well established. And I think the end-to-end security, the flexibility of a credential technology, and also the peace of mind that a customer, they need to make the change, as Mark illustrated. It's a painful change, right, for people to make. So when they do make the change, they want to make sure they do it for enhanced security. It's got to have a degree of flexibility to cope for a multitude of different applications. And also, I definitely see the sustainability conversation coming more and more into conversations now, where they're looking for alternative forms necessary from a white plastic card, and that doesn't actually compromise any of the security standards or the applications that they want a credential technology to fulfill.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this leads on quite nicely into how effectively current physical access control systems are meeting organizational needs. And we saw a bit of a drop from, I think, our last report that came out just at the start of 2020. There was almost 10% fewer who believed they were really satisfied, or certainly it met and exceeded all the requirements. I think, Mark, you've mentioned this, that a result of the pandemic has been that change in requirements. Is that helped that conversation with, as you say, with the C-suite to convince them that upgrades are needed? And has it been a kind of mix of both health and safety and security and facilities all coming together in building that?
Absolutely. I think, your graph is quite clear, right? Obviously, people are not happy with the product that we as an industry are giving them. I don't think that we've done a worse job, or I don't think as an industry we've not satisfied our clients. I think they've probably got now more visibility of what they needed it for. So I talk a lot about with our clients about, do you want a door opening system, or do you want an access control system that gives you data and gives you all those things? If you want a door opening system, you're probably going to be frustrated during COVID. Okay. If you want an access control system that's enterprise, that's network, that's got all the functionality, can get you the data at a push of a button, then definitely that's where your system should be. And I kind of expect that the expectation of the system that they thought they had wasn't quite met there. And we all know that access control systems have 1 billion features, and we only use 10 of them because that's just a symptom of the industry. But I do believe that there's definitely a realization now that the access control system has to work a lot harder, and definitely the C-suite. I keep talking about the C-suite looking down at us and saying, right, can I have this data? And when they can't have the data and they can't get the reports in a timely manner, which is what they were used to, then they become very frustrated, and obviously then that cascades down to our heads of security. I mean, we've got one client during COVID, every single week for the 2 years of COVID, we were running a report. So our team, who's the embedded team in the run space, we're running a report on 600,000 people, where they were, where they weren't, how many times they're going to building. And that data then allowed the C-suite to make decisions about their business. So you can only do that if you have a properly organized, managed access control system. And I suspect that the drop now is that people thought they had a managed, organized access control system, but they actually had probably a door opening system that wasn't quite working as well as or as hard as it should have been. I would suspect that's why the numbers dropped so much.
Yeah, it's almost about opening their eyes to show them, how much technology, particularly I think security and facilities managers are probably aware of what's out there, but explaining that to the C-suite and convincing them that there is so much more you can get out of an access control system now compared to 10, 15 years ago might be quite eye-opening, I guess, for the rest of the business. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, is that something you're seeing as well, that you're getting conversations with people who aren't satisfied more than ever because they've maybe not been able to convince the C-suite previously, and also what is the kind of expected pace of change when end users are kind of coming to you and asking, how quickly can we get an upgrade? I guess it might depend on the size of the organization. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Mark touched on it previously. I mean, this comes down to knowledge, right? So it comes down to understanding what the access control system can do and how it can be utilized with the data demands that the clients are requiring. Clearly a non-premium system cannot perform the level of complexity in terms of features, functionality, and driving best practice that maybe a global enterprise system could perform. And also we're seeing, of course, tailored and individual requirements where, in the past, in what I would call sort of integration 1.0, you would maybe see the access control system integrating into maybe the CCTV system or the fire or other security systems. Now we're seeing a further layer on the top, reporting layer on top, provided by clients or provided by third-party technology partners of ours, where they're taking data from access control systems and other business systems and combining that as as an overall data set into a client's business. In regards to sort of your question on change, well, it comes down to how quick, how complex, and aligning all the different factors around the table. I think in every case people want everything tomorrow, right? But that's not always possible, and we work through with clients and partners to understand if they're going to make the change, what's the end game, what's their vision, what they want to achieve. I remember back in the early 2000s when the first generation of smart card technology was coming around, there was always this ubiquitous desire to have a one card fits all solution. And in most cases, from a technology standpoint, the card would meet that requirement. But it was different alignments and different reporting structures and different ownership of technology within inside the end client that sometimes didn't make didn't make it all connect together. And I think we're now seeing that coming around again further, but from a more overall business perspective when it comes to data management.
Yeah, and again, it moves us on a little bit to who the types of people you are speaking to now with clients. Obviously, traditionally, it's been the security department, the security director, and probably parts of the C-suite as major investments take place. But our report actually showed that facilities and particularly IT teams are having an increasingly kind of notable say in the decision-making process. Are there different conversations that you're kind of having now, Matt, with those clients, because you're not just talking to one department, you're talking to maybe 3, 4, 5 departments?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's coming from the top down, you're getting job titles coming in, employee experience directors, head of innovation, head of sustainability, for example, the sort of personas we're now seeing when influencing the choice of technology and migration. There are additions in more traditional roles such as security managers, FM, IT. We're seeing a lot of sort of digital transformation teams and departments coming in, and there's obviously a growing awareness surrounding the drive for physical security and IT security departments to work closer together, right? As the facility, as the access control system and devices have evolved into sort of IP-based products. Many are, of course, connected to the company's network and require the overall governance from IT, and that sort of cyber element is now a massive consideration, as it should be. And this has brought many benefits, but also challenges and concerns over those potential vulnerabilities. And as an industry, we need to sort of gear ourselves up further to be able to deliver the right sort of documentation, the right surveys, and to adhere to the latest standards. And we especially see this when we talk to customers about, say, using mobile, which comes from our Ego cloud portal, and customers wanting to utilize mobile API and SDKs, and there's considerations around security and how we employ security as part of our design experience on a product.
Yeah, and Mark, is that something you're having as well from a consultancy perspective? Coming in, you're talking to several departments, I guess, and particularly with the cyber and the IT world, is there a kind of sort of missing a bit of a skills gap there in terms of an understanding from the physical security team? And is that why you maybe you have to end up talking to the cyber and the IT professionals as well?
I think it's an education for us as an industry as well, right? So our access control system is not just opening and closing doors. Okay, first and foremost, it has to provide security, but like everything in a building, it has to do multiple functions. Everything has to work harder, and we see that the IT people moving to IT again, it's a data point, it's an asset for the company, and we've got to make our assets not just provide security, but also provide other features that other people may need, right? So Matt talked about having the card, going to the coffee machines, going to printing, providing security, information security, right, just on the card and the credential. So they're natural ones that we as an industry went to, but as we move towards more asset driven, more asset management driven from a client side, we see that the type of people that are funding and moving the stakeholders that are important or higher important than maybe just a security thing are driving a lot of that. So if you couple that with, as I talked about earlier, James, if you couple that with the fact that we see definitely in the build space, or definitely in enterprise technology, that there's a cloud and there's an edge controller. The gap in the middle is filled with IT infrastructure. So if a big part of the ecosystem is one bit's in the cloud, one bit's in the edge, and then we're doing our security, if the bit in the middle is IT, then without a doubt the stakeholders, those stakeholders need to be there and on the table. Flip that to when you put it into the cloud. If you're then going into the cloud, great, right? You're into the cloud. Where does the data live? Who wants that data? As Matt said, digital transformation. People are hungry now to understand what people are doing in their buildings, because the building is an asset that, since COVID, is not working as hard as it probably should be or could be. So they're using us to give them that sort of information. So yes, definitely the stakeholders are changing, and I think that's the evolution of our systems and our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's impossible to ignore the fact that, you know, IP connections and everything like this is going to bring in more people, more stakeholders within a business. And it's just keeping on that cyber security strategy kind of trend. Mark, can you explain how, you know, a new physical access control system can actually support a cyber security strategy? You know, the integration of a new system that's more upgraded, that's more updated, and how that can actually better protect, you know, cyber and your data physically as well.
Yes, so clearly the access control system tends to be physically, as in doors or windows and bars, so it's protecting a physical thing. The IT systems obviously the security systems tend to be the IT side of the networks. What typically we're seeing is that historically IT systems and people have been they've been not so worried about the security within their building. They're more worried about the security outside the building. So if you're a hacker, you're hacking into an enterprise. If you're a person, you're not getting into our front door because our physical security stops you getting in. So we're seeing now that actually the Trojan horse and those sorts of types incidents are coming into the cyber world. So understanding where people are within a building, who was at a desk when we had a cyber incident. So we've done a project many years ago, well, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where the access control system was integrated to the IT cyber system. So if there was a person at a desk and the cyber system detected a virus or whatever, malware, the cameras would look at that desk, find out if there was a person there. If there was no person there, then they knew it was a certain type of virus. If there was a person there, then they could isolate the link. So we're seeing our systems converging to help cyber systems at a very practical level, help the cyber defense teams work quicker and faster. I think that's definitely a use case. I think when you look at access control as a system, and again, you're now plugged into HR systems, you're plugged into IT systems, management systems, building management systems, smart building systems, all of those systems, you have to have the highest possible cyber credentials to make sure that your system, once it's on that top level, isn't a weakness into that top tier. So other IT systems that have been there for a long time clearly have always had that cyber resilience. Our access control systems tended to be, over the years, a separate thing on a separate network because we're security. And now as we're moving it into that converged model, it's super important that the technology that we're putting onto the converged platform has the same cyber credentials as every other platform that sits on that top table.
Yeah, it's one thing talked about quite a lot is ensuring that, you know, the physical access system isn't seen as that vulnerability point. It's you know, quite ironic if your security system is actually your vulnerability within a network. And I think that point about that insider threat and a physical access system being able to sort of show data of where people are, it creates that accountability, I guess, for making sure that you know who logged on at a certain time, or who entered that particular part of the building at a certain time. I think it's what I'm also, some of the discussions I'm having is that it forms part of your overall kind of resilience strategy, maybe a more enterprise risk management strategy, that if you've got that data, you're then able to be accountable and create a more holistic, security culture within your business, because people know that everybody's, you're going to be held accountable if you were there at the wrong time, per se. I think we'll move some great discussion about the current state of access control and the upgrading challenges and all this kind of thing, and we'll move now on to a little bit more about the specific technologies and some of the major trends we've seen. I've spotted we've already had a question from Ashley about mobile access. So if we move on to this now, and one trend that really did catch our eye, as it has done for the last couple of years, is that growth in demand for mobile access control systems. I think in our 2020 report, we found that 16% of the industry had upgraded to mobile. This figure now stands at 24%, while another 42% are still planning to upgrade. Matt, from a HID perspective, is this something you're seeing as well? And why do you think this is? Why is the demand so high for mobile access?
Yeah, we're seeing this every day in pretty much the majority of the meetings that we're taking now. Mobile access is playing a core or certain part of an element of the discussions we're having with customers. Why? Well, we live in a mobile first generation, right? So we book holidays, we buy products, we use our mobile phones, social media for every part of working life. We pretty much use our mobile phones. As business systems certainly also evolve up into the cloud, it's just a natural progression for that for a physical credential as well. Certain customers are in different stages in terms of how they approach the migration and really what they want to achieve by that. But we're seeing customers look at it again from a holistic point of view. What do we want to achieve by moving to mobile access? How can we make that part of our overall strategy in terms of our security, whether it's a bring your own device or a company supplied device? And we're seeing a lot of entrants into certainly the smart building space in the prop tech arena, who are taking our, say, mobile access API and SDK plugins and building out their own customized apps for their clients as a single solution. And then the access control takes on a slightly different meaning. It's then the key to make a user in a building put out their mobile phone and use that as part of an overall experience. And so from that, you can get other notifications sent to you, whether it's about the canteen, or whereas a meeting room booking, or any environmental systems, etc. So mobile access, exactly the same way as a physical security system is forming a part of a virtual environment on somebody's phone.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess is it supporting an organization's kind of overall digital transformation plans?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to a lot of digital transformation teams and departments in terms of how they can either use it for themselves, or if they're renting space out to clients, how they can use that from a sort of client perspective as well. So it's proving interesting in terms of some of the opportunities and discussions it's opening up. And of course, you bring into factor then maybe your digital security installer with some different technology players as well. And companies like March, for example, would manage the overall approach over the top of there. So we're seeing a different array of conversations. Certainly, our biggest driver and one of the principal meeting topics we're seeing with all of our teams at the moment is really centered around mobile. And I think when you look at the API and SDKs available, most sort of enterprise level systems would take the APIs available and integrate those as part of their overall solution. So you can issue a digital credential the same way as you can issue a mobile credential, a physical credential from the access control platform. And of course, if we're not coming into an office and we're not, having the 9 to 5 pre-pandemic working environments, it's easier to issue a digital credential to anybody anywhere in the world from a centralized place, rather than going to pick up a physical card. Plus, of course, you can't use, you wouldn't necessarily give your mobile phone to somebody to go through a door, but you might give your physical card to somebody to go through a door. So even by the nature of that, there's also an added benefit from moving to mobile. And the other thing we're seeing creeping in now as well, and I think you come onto it later on in the report, is sustainability. That's becoming a driver through the security teams now as well, and clearly moving to a mobile credential has advantages in that space as well, right? Say shipping lots of bits of plastic all around the world.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll touch on sustainability shortly, but it's interesting to see how different solutions cover lots of different bases. I think for the requirements from end users. Mark, when you're asked about mobile solutions, are there any kind of sort of regular questions you're asked about, maybe some of the challenges involved or how it works? I'm guessing something like, whether they can bring their own devices, that kind of stuff. Are they common questions that you see when talking about mobile access upgrades?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to one question before that question, when we're talking to clients, we're asking, okay, what is it you want to achieve, right? Do you want to achieve, and we're seeing it's frictionless, or that experience into a building is what they're after. And the credential, so what's driving this change? The driver is frictionless. So when we look at it, we're like, okay, well, what else could you use? You could use biometrics, but we've got massive challenges of facial recognition, just from a legality perspective. I think when you look at that as a driver, they want just frictionless. So then the natural answer is going to be going to the phone, because it's a lot easier to regulate, it's a lot easier to manage, it's a lot easier to support than having a biometric type across a big wide estate. Once you get into that question, then you're down to okay, what are the challenges of implementing it? Definitely, you've got so many platforms that people can use. You've got to be your own device. We've even got clients that have their own phones, and they won't allow apps on their phone unless it's been built and tested and pen tested in the right way from their business. So we see then that this app is not only an app that's on the App Store, but it's an extension of a company. So that process in getting apps into their world becomes quite challenging on an enterprise level. Yes, you can use standard apps, and as Matt said, there are prop tech apps out there which are brilliant, right? And they're driving a lot of change in the property market, in our real estate market, which is where we obviously serve. But I do think that yes, if the challenges are, the barriers to entry are to get that app approved onto systems, then we have to plan properly, years or 6 months or years or whatever it might be, to get those systems tested. And that is a big technology shift that not a lot of companies are aware of, right? Because many of my clients want to be app developers, that's for sure. And so there's definitely if you have a standard app, is it suitable to go on my network? And very much IT systems are very specific because they're very mature, but their app development teams are very much not. So I see that as a challenge into whole scale adoption at pace.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to the sort of hybrid approach that some teams are using them for certain aspects of their access control, and others aren't for some areas. And just had a message from Tony here. Thanks for writing in, Tony. Bring your own devices require staff to use their personal device, which some might not always be willing to do. And obviously, company devices can be expensive. So there's some challenges there as well. But certainly the demand is still high. And we do have a question from Ashley, and I'm just going to bring this up now just because it's on the topic. I don't know, Matt, if you want to answer this one. What challenges have you found going from a physical card to a mobile credential, where organisations have a compliance or maybe an audit requirement regulation where visible ID is required, and how would you address those challenges?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one of a number of questions answered which we face every day. So, I think where physical, a badge around the neck to show the person's photograph and their credentials, if that that can still be utilised, right? You can buy printable plastic cards that do not have the technology inside them for a relatively cheap price. If that's something that people still required to do, that's something that people have done, and we've seen customers move away from physical access control cards with their printed credentials to just buying a white plastic card and printing on that as well with their credentials on. And inside, say, our mobile access app, you can actually store the person's picture as well, so you can see their physical credential. You can design out the credential in exactly the same way as a visible one would be around the neck, with all the the customized logo, names, pictures, so you can physically present the phone to someone. And also, I worked with a client in the city, and this was a key driving point for them. And so we wandered around the building for about half an hour, looking at how people use their access control cards, and actually how many of them were actually physically displayed. And of that, it was a very rough survey, right? And less than half were displayed. And when you challenged 3 or 4 different individuals, the picture could have been 16 years old, and they could have grayed like myself, or facial hair, or what have you. So I think it's still there. I don't see as much prevalent I don't think it's as big a barrier as it once was. The biggest challenge we work extensively with clients with is how they upgrade their physical hardware so they're mobile capable. So if they're installing readers today, and they don't plan for mobile straight away, but they want to look at that in the future, how do they get the infrastructure right? And if they've got existing hardware, working with them to ensure that they've got hardware capable of then rolling out mobile at a later point in time. When we do that, we generally find that clients will work down either a small sort of proof of concept route, where we can provide necessary training and support around that, and then broaden that out to the wider organization. It's one of a number of questions that we come across pretty frequently that we work to overcome.
Good stuff, and Ashley, I'm sure hopefully that answered your question. Looking at some other trends now, we've brought up a comparison graph here for those looking at the slides, which hopefully would be quite interesting. We've got lots of these in the report itself. There's some similarities there, but also some new stuff that came in, which we've already touched on, really, which was the kind of touchless and contactless solutions. That was not a trend we kind of highlighted in 2020 per se, but a huge percentage, 44% in 2022. Saw that as shaping the access control industry in the future, and obviously mobile alongside biometrics will play a role in that. I think another thing here is the greater demand for integration, and I think this sort of moves us on to that question around smart buildings. And Mark, if I could ask you a question here, what do you perceive to be a smart building, and in this, where do you see the role of access control in that?
So again, it comes from who, from my perspective, who you're asking, what do they perceive as smart. So if a real estate person's talking to you about smart, they want to have single pane of glass. They want to have all of the data so they can manage their buildings in a more efficient way. And access control enables that, because it's part of the team of systems that sit on that combined layer. So access control in that sense, in a real estate sense, is definitely part of how a building runs, right? So we then have SDKs into those systems, and moving data around is very much part of that. If there's a fire alarm in a plant room, then the CCTV system can ping up on the screen there. So not just the typical integration that you would see, or we would see in years past, where access control and CCTV were integrated. It's now into the fire alarm, into the BMS, into all the other subsystems, and having that interoperability is definitely where smart from that end stands. When we talk to enterprise clients and we say to them about what is smart for them is more about the people. Where are the people? How many desks are being used? How many meeting rooms are used? Should I have an 8-person meeting room or a 4-person meeting room? And again, occupancy data from a CCTV or access control is definitely what I would say would be smart in that space. For end users, again, the end user occupier, again, it's about how do we then smartly move our data into their world so they can make decisions and make decisions on people and places. So I think smart is it's two or three strong answer there. And I think the drive that we see in the prop tech industry that Matt mentioned there earlier is about smart being pushed to the user. So an app on a phone getting into a building. Can I walk to my building? Can I find a hot desk? Can I turn the temperature up near me? Can I turn the lighting down? And obviously getting into the building is enabling all of that. The reason that we see prop tech absolutely thirst for access control is one of adoption. So if you're trying to drive prop tech into a building, it's only so many times I turn the temperature up in my room, right? You don't do it every day, and people then start to not use the app. Whereas if you have to use your access control every single day, go and get your printer, go and get your coffee, or whatever you're doing with your phone, and your access control system is enabling that, then they get much higher adoption into their smart systems. So access control is an enabler for smart systems for the end user, and definitely for the prop tech industry for us.
Sure, yeah, and that's something that enabler element is something that I've heard from work with some analysts who have put some thoughts into the report itself, called Omdia, and they talk about how access control is often the kind of starting point for an integrated smart building environment, because it integrates with everything. And I see it in my building. I walk in and tap my card, and suddenly the lift is called to the exact floor that it's linked to, and all of this kind of stuff. So it's all quite interesting. Matt, staying on that subject, Matt, how important do you think open standards are in the development of a more integrated and smarter building facility?
Oh, I think it's paramount, right? So I think one of the things we've seen is that we discussed, of course, outdated credential technology before, but from a systems approach, a glaring weakness of older technologies is proprietary software bound by specific hardware, and that locks the vendor in, limits the organization's ability to sort of turn to alternative suppliers, improve security, reduce costs, and enhance the whole user experience. And older systems generally do not have the API connectivity experience that the more modern systems that use open standards can. And they provide a lot more versatility with connected smart building applications. And again, coming back to sort of workplace experience applications, it becomes to a point where coming back to your previous question on smart, it's about ensuring the building's being utilized in the most effective manner possible, the most cost-effective manner possible, and the most efficient manner possible as well. And having systems that conform to open modern standards that drive that overall data flow and the decision-making process in an automated fashion, and can provide meaningful top-level report for, say, the C-suite guys right the way through the business, is about bringing it all together to provide that overall smart approach. And having open systems that with connectivity is absolutely paramount to them.
Absolutely. We've got lots of questions coming in here. Keep them coming, but we might not be able to get through all of them. There's just a quick question here about, will we get the recorded link of the session? Yes, you will. You'll be sent it after the session within the next 24 to 48 hours. So don't worry if you have missed the start or anything like that. There's one here that is something that we wanted to talk about anyway. And Mark, I know sustainability is quite a big point from a QCIC perspective. I think in our report, 19% of professionals recognised that security can play a role in supporting sustainability goals. That's a good number. 1 in 5 sort of realising this, but there's obviously more to be done. How can physical access control play a role in that sustainability agenda?
Look, as you said, James, we're hugely passionate about sustainability. We as a business been carbon neutral since before COVID, so pre-2019, 2018. And it's part of it drives our business massively around the world. And when we talk to clients, the clients that we're talking to that are thinking about building buildings now that might not be built for 10 years, it's the only question, really. It's the thing that every responsible developer, every responsible business is looking for. So how does access control systems enable it? Again, if you're talking to a business and we can say, look, Mr. Company A, you've only got 63% utilization in these rooms, then you can turn off your heating, turn down your space, and actually don't rent that space, right? So that agile model is definitely changing, and is definitely going to change in how we as a company, as a world, commerce, right? Because a lot of my clients now are saying, look, I don't want a great big building. I want lots of little buildings that can expand and contract very quickly. Having that data, having access control enable that is just part of that. Then you go down to the micro level. So yes, obviously every single piece of panel that's in a building, every single piece of plastic that's in the building is now accountable. When I travel around the world, I have to write a little form that says I got a car what sort of car was it to the airport, what sort of plane did I get, and that's to meet our sustainability goals. But when we're designing buildings now, we're even going down to that sort of level that Matt mentioned about, actually, do you need plastic? Can we get that piece of plastic away? And that's just one tiny piece of plastic. We've implemented things like looking at the supply chain solutions and the holistic review of how you deploy access control. So making sure that all of the the waste doesn't even go to sites. So all the recycled stuff is recycled at source. Again, massive change in how our industry thinks about access control and thinks about CCTV and all the subsystems that go into it. And I think if we as an industry can start to think our little tiny piece of plastic is really, 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 really important, then we as an industry can obviously then stand up against the big guys who are saying that actually we want pure sustainability in all of our buildings. And we're seeing that even for us, we're seeing now that trying to get to talk to clients and talking to developers, you can't be talking to them unless you're fully sustainable as an organisation, and that I think will drive change throughout our industry, right down to the integrated guy with a van and making sure it's an electric van, not a diesel van. So change is definitely going to come widespread through our industry, and that's key, I think, to us as a business.
Yeah, and I think this brings it back to that C-suite. You know, what is important at the C-suite is often going to drive overall business change, and sustainability is something you just cannot get away from anymore. It's dominating the headlines. It's too important to ignore. And Matt, from literally the physical hardware sort of perspective, how can wireless access control play a part in that sustainability approach?
Yeah, it can. I'm pleased that this is on the agenda, and it should be, and it should have been probably more important a long time ago. And I think we're playing catch up on this. And as Mark said, constructing and operating sustainable green buildings is self-evident. It's hugely important in the context of reducing carbon. And I think it's up to manufacturers to be able to ensure that when we designing, developing products, that we have sustainability from sourcing, design to how we power equipment, and right the way through as a key element. So, for example, on our readers, we have an intelligent power mode that reduces current consumption by about 43%. So you imagine the energy saving across the read, say thousands of readers that you can you could look at, and of course having. And it's going back to what we were talking about before about having interoperable systems, not necessarily having wireless systems, but having interoperable systems. Having that approach and which prevents people having to rip out and replace systems as their requirements change or the design becomes altered. And we have that increased flexibility. And flexibility and sustainability in terms of features and functions go hand in hand. In this conversation, and of course, as alludes to the statement Mark made at the beginning, this flows from top downwards, right? So every department inside a company we're dealing with has these sustainability goals. I was with a client the other week talking about mobile access, and he was in the meeting room waiting for us to arrive, and he had an alarm go off on his phone because there was technology in the meeting room that actually told his superiors there was only one person in a room when there should be more than one person in a room. So having readers that utilize those sorts of applications that drive that overall approach is key for moving forwards, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and we've talked about sort of tracking and employee and visitor tracking throughout this sort of conversation. It's something that I was planning on bringing up, but I think we've covered it off quite well, and that can obviously play an important role in that sustainability agenda as well as that accountability and cybersecurity approach, everything that brings. So it's interesting to see how all these different demands can play into each other and with newer technology. We are really running out of time now, so we've got through a few questions. There's lots more coming in. If we can't answer your questions, please just do reach out and we can forward them on. Just let us know. The presentation slides will be are available to download, I believe, on the front end. So they should be in the resource section of the webinar. If not, again, please just let us know and we can send them through afterwards. We've got probably time for one more question. I'm just looking through these here. It's quite a specific one, but we'll end on this as an overall, because I think we've talked about it quite a lot. Mark, can you just elucidate the difference between a physical access control system and a door opening system? I know we talked about it earlier, but what would be your kind of key differentiator between those two things?
Okay, 30-second elevator. A door opening system to me, if you don't use your access control system, if people don't use access control systems to grab data, to grab those things, then you may as well go to a digilock, because all you're doing is stopping a person going through a door. And a proper access control system that is a management system that allows you to run reports, that allows you to isolate it and to pass data to other parts of a business. So we say, yeah, door open system is your rudimentary, either a badly installed access control system or just a digilock, right? That does a job. It stops people from crossing one secure line to another. If you want to have a proper access control system that then starts to be used as a management tool, then that's what we see, or what we're trying to advise our clients to have, to own and to manage. And that's the ends of the spectrum, really.
Perfect. Thank you. And that is all we've got time for, unfortunately. And thank you, Matt and Mark. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, to join in the webinar today. Some really interesting points raised. The report will be coming out in the following weeks, and so keep an eye out. But we will obviously notify you when it's out. And thank you for joining today. There's no doubt that the access control sector continues to be a central component of a physical security strategy and program, and it becomes even more so as building and visitor access is more important than ever, particularly during COVID with healthcare measures and things like that. Thank you to our sponsor, HID Global, as well as to everyone else in the audience. As I say, you'll be notified once the report comes out, and within the next 24 hours, you will receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Please also feel free to invite your colleagues and your peers who may not have been available to listen to the event. But that's all from today's session. Thanks from me, thanks from Matt, thanks from Mark, and thanks from HID Global, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.